So today I'm joined by Richie Harkham, entrepreneur, winemaker, philanthropist, yoga teacher, and the man behind Hark Angel Foundation, which is on a mission to build 100 schools in the world's most vulnerable communities, and a great friend of mine. Richie's journey is incredible, not just because of what he's done or the adversity that he's overcome, but it's the person he has become and his zest for life. I don't want to just talk about what you've built, Rich, but I want to explore today why it matters to you and what it's taught you about yourself. So my first question, and I have a lot of questions for you, so welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back to my apartment.
Thank you. I think I was here last night having dinner.
It's good to have you back. I got so many questions for you.
Amazing.
Okay, but this is my first question. And I'm genuinely curious to understand you even more than what I do. So my first question is, before we get into the achievements, how would the people closest to you describe you when you're just Richie? Not the businessman or the charity worker, just Richie.
That's an interesting one to start with. I think happy, definitely cheeky, a little bit naughty. I'm very curious. I'm full on, but I'm very chilled at the same time. And I think I'm like just a fun person. Hopefully I'm light and easy. And I love to be there for my friends. So hopefully they describe me as a very good friend because I try to be there for all my friends because my friends, for me, are everything. And I think that I handpick the best people to be around me, you know.
You are a good friend.
Thank you. You are as well.
Where does all that come from? How do you do it? How are you such a good friend? Because you are such a good friend when you have so much going on.
I think I don't even try. It just comes naturally. I think a friend, people which have friends, to be a friend or to have a friend is effort. You know, people, if you're a bad person or if you're not nice or if you don't have a lot of friends, it's a real testament to someone to have friends because friends is a relationship. And relationships is one of the best things that we have in life, I think. You know, like, I think when we and a lot of the time I'm going to talk about this, when we're on our deathbed, that's how I consider my life all the time. I have a zest for life. As you said, one of the things that matter the most is the relationships that you have. And even when I was unwell, which I'm sure we'll get into, you really, really need those people then, you know. But how you treat people is how people will treat you. You know, so it's a lovely thing to have friends. And there's a lovely thing that you only need one or two really good friends and your life is made, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing.
You're an amazing friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I'm going to ask you about friends in the context of, like, some people may have heard your story, but a lot of it centers around not just your achievements, but the accident, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the accident and what happened to you in a second. But when I asked you last night if we could talk about the accident, you said to me, you said we could, but you said it might get a bit dark. What did you mean by that?
So I think the story of what I went through, you know, there are a lot of dark places. A lot of the time, you know, I recovered now, right? So it seems like it's a good story. But when you're in the trenches, when it's war every day of your life for years, it's ugly. And one thing that people don't understand about recovery is it's not linear. Like if you're unwell, you're unwell. You know, I really feel like, and thank God, I'm back on the side of the living. But I have so much compassion for people which are unwell because there's the living on one side and then there's people which are going through trauma every single day of their life, whether it be sickness, illness, whether it will be, you know, addiction, whether it will be homelessness, whether it be financial problems. There are so many issues that people have. And one of the biggest things when you're unwell, when I was unwell, it was a dark time a lot of the time. Of course, I fought so hard always to be my best, but when you have chronic pain in and out of operations and surgeries and, you know, you have hope and then the hope is taken away from you. You know, I had no one. One of my biggest problems was I had no one that I could look for to give me hope. Without hope, you're hopeless and you will give up in your mind and your soul and your spirit. And that's one of the things that I try to do today is give hope to other people that are unwell.
Can you tell us what happened for those that don't know?
Sure. We'll keep it brief.
Sure.
But basically, it happened 11 years ago, 16th of April, 2014. I used to love motorbikes, and I was riding my motorbike to meet one of our friends, to have a sauna actually. And very unassuming, it was a Wednesday evening, and I was driving down Victoria Road in Bellevue Hill, and there was a white station Holden wagon parked at the red brick gates of an apartment block. And I saw him waiting there, and as I accelerated to go past him, he just came flying up. And I was like, I could tell he was going to hit me, and I just like, if I accelerate faster, maybe he'll miss me. And I accelerated faster, and he hit me, and he pushed me in oncoming traffic. And in that moment there, when I was pushed in oncoming traffic, all I could see was headlights blaring. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get run over. I'm going to get killed. And they say your whole life flashes in front of you. It did. But rather than my whole life, it was just all the great things that I had done in my life and all my achievements. And I got to a point in a matter of milliseconds where I was just like, you know what? I'm ready to go if I go. I thought I was going to get run over. The car veered off and missed me. And the bike was going down, and I pushed off somehow, and I landed on my helmet and broke my helmet, landed on my head. I thought I broke my neck, and I looked down at my leg. I still didn't feel any pain. My immediate thing was get off the road, but I tried to move and I couldn't. And I looked down at my leg, and my bone of my tibia and fibula were compound, so that they were sticking out of my leg. And I was just bleeding out on the side of the road. And it was a very, very traumatic 20 minutes. It was rush hour traffic. So it took 20 minutes or so for the ambulance to come. And it was a massive accident. I don't know if you've ever seen a motorbike accident. It's horrific. Everyone pulls over every side of the road. Loads of people come. There was an amazing woman, which was a doctor. She was there, and another guy. But they were on the phone to 000, and they were like, you got to stop the bleeding, because I was bleeding out. And they wanted to put a wet bandage to cover my broken leg on my bones. And I was like, no. And I was screaming. It was very horrific. And there was a 24-hour period where, I was in a neck brace, and they were just testing to see if I was going to be paralyzed or not. And it was a very scary, scary time. But it was a very interesting thing. From before that happened to when it happened in a matter of seconds. And the one thing that just shocked the hell out of me, my one big lesson from that was how quickly your life can change in 1 second. Because before that, I was the strongest, fittest person at the peak of my strength and fitness, and I was invincible. And then 1 second later, I was lying on the side of the road, potentially going to be paralyzed, with my leg broken, all out on the road in front of me. And I just could not believe how in 1 second our lives can change forever.
Did you stay conscious for all of that?
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
And what, just out of interest, that is horrific, and I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
But what happens in that moment? What support did you have in that moment? I know that you were probably meeting our friend Sasha. Did he know what was who was there for you in that moment where you're so vulnerable? And
so it was probably one of the scariest moments of my life. And I think a few things flashed when I was on that road was how many times I just almost got hurt when I did stupid things and got away with it. And this time, this is going to be a long journey. I just felt it. My bones were coming out. I could potentially had a broken neck. And I was screaming out, why God, why God, why me, why me? Because I couldn't understand how this could happen to me. You never think it's going to happen to you. You never think that, God forbid, one day you'll be fine, then you get cancer. Or someone dies that you're close to. Or you have an illness. Or you lose your business. Or something goes wrong in your life. And the big lesson for me in all of that, and I think if I just preface everything with lessons, which is very important, which people could take with them, is you really have to do whatever you want to do today. my accident for me made me a person where I roll the dice in life and I live life to the fullest every freaking second. Every second. You read out all those things I do. Why should I have a passion for one thing when I have a passion for so many things? I want to try everything in life. I want to get the lemon of life and squeeze every little drop out of that lemon. And that's what my accident gave me. Later on in the journey, I died in an operation. I stopped breathing, got reintubated, came back to life again. So two very, in my mind, near-death experiences that pushed me out to play the cards of life as best as I can. I don't save bottles of wine anymore. I don't not go on that holiday. I really just try to get the most out of every single experience in life that I can. Whilst before, I was still very much like that, but I would say, I put things off for later. You don't know when later's going to be, if you will have a later. So you should really just try to be your best now. A lot of people are scared or it's just too hard. Take the chance. It's worth it.
Could you give the listener some context of what you went through,
Sure.
what that recovery was like? Can you just...
Sure. So from that point on, I was in a 4-year journey, a hospital journey. I know that you've also been through your own trials and tribulations yourself. I was there for you during that period. So you understand it, but most people don't understand it. I was stuck in and out of hospitals for 4 years straight. So I had 9 major operations, 8 of which failed me. So every recovery is a 6-month recovery. So my leg, my knee got smashed into 1,000 pieces. So they tried to rebuild my knee, and first of all, my bones didn't heal in my leg. Then they tried to rebuild my knee. And then 6 months after that, my leg was being held up by 2 pieces of metal. They realized that the whole bone of my knee that they tried to rebuild had dropped down, and I was basically walking on 2 pieces of metal. And I was going to lose my leg in Australia, and I went overseas to do a first in the world operation. I would not accept losing my leg. I investigated the 6 best surgeons in the world. 5 out of the 6 said, forget about it. And the #1 trauma orthopedic surgeon in the world, Professor Christian Kretek, he told me he would have a go, but he's never done it before.
Where was he based?
In Hanover, Germany. So
how did you find these people?
So I'm an entrepreneur. So I do due diligence. Everything I do, I'll investigate. For me, when someone tells me no, I've been told no all my life. I don't listen to what people say. I live the opposite of regular people in everything I do. So for me, it doesn't matter if someone says no, yes. It's very limited to what's out there in the world. It's another very good lesson. You know in yourself what you can achieve, and the world is a big place. We're all connected. Don't ever listen to someone's belief. Anyone could do anything in the world that they want to do if they tried every single minute and they were not scared of rejection or failure. And I wasn't. I had nothing to lose. So I said, I used a doctor friend of mine because no doctors would talk to me. I would email doctors and call them and never hear a response. So I hired a doctor in America who I was friend of the family to contact the other doctors, and they would contact her with my case, and he said he would have a go. And I flew over to Hanover, Germany, and I was a guinea pig. So I was the first person in the world that we know of to get a graft of a live knee transplant, which means that my leg was completely decimated in Australia. This happened a couple of times, but the first time I did it, it was a woman, and she was run over. So she was brain dead, but her heart was still alive. They kept her alive in a ventilator, and they harvested her knee while she was alive, and they kept it alive, and they used 3D software technology to scan and to work out exactly which part of my knee is defected, and they cut exactly that part of her knee with meniscus, cartilage, took stem cells out of my hip, my iliac crest in the hip bone, and bone cement, and they tricked my leg by hammering on hers with bone cement that is my knee. And I didn't have to take any anti-rejection drugs. It's a first in the world operation of its kind.
Is this the one that saved you? Was this?
I did that a couple of times. So part of what happened later was, And I went through a lot of trials and tribulations because I was first in the world. I did 4 operations in Germany. When I did that operation again, so my 6th operation was to get that transplant again because the first one didn't work. It was from a young boy, which is the Hark Angel story, which we can get into later. But that's the one where I kind of healed after that. But in my knee today, I have, my knee, I have the woman's tibia, part of this young boy's knee, and prosthetic inside. So my recovery is like 1 in millions and millions and millions, because right at the end of my journey, I got a golden staph infection. So I worked really hard for 3 years to recover, and I had the smallest operations, some screws removed in my leg. I went back, got them out, came back to Australia, and everything I'd worked for 3 years got taken away from me. And it was one of the hardest times of my life. I went from being 0 to maybe 8 or 9 again, walk for the first time. I couldn't walk for 4 years unassisted. Had chronic pain for 4 years. I spent hundreds of days laying in a hospital bed or laying in a bed for more than 20 hours a day. They put me on a steroid called Forteo. I spent 180 days or 120 days, 180 days on antibiotics, maybe 120 of those with a 24-hour IV with 14,000 milligrams of flucloxacillin, one of the strongest antibiotics in the world. End up with a golden staph. They want to chop my leg off. 30 surgeons in Australia wouldn't take me on after that. They said it's an amputation. I found one, my last and final go, which said I'll do it. And I was really, really fortunate. I've fully recovered now.
Wow.
So really, really lucky. But through all that, I had depression, anxiety, loneliness. When you're injured and you have chronic pain and you're in this world of hospitals, it's an extremely hard place to be. Extremely tough place. I was always positive. I was still at the gym. They knew me at Icebergs for the person who used to crawl up the stairs of the pool. I never stopped training. I never stopped giving up. I'd find small things that would help me.
What happened? What about the rest of your life? What about work? Like, this is 4 years of your life you're talking about.
Yeah.
How did the rest of your world continue to function?
Yeah.
Or it didn't?
Things have to keep going on. I was a little bit on the sidelines, but it gave me much more of a zest for life. I was so much hungrier after that, knowing that I was kind of limited in a way. But life is hard with pain. Life is I had a walking stick, or I was in a wheelchair, or I had crutches for 4 years. So it was hard without having a leg. A lot of the doctors said to me I'd never walk again unassisted. And at the end they said, you're never going to keep your leg. It's impossible, and the rest of my life suffered a lot. But, I think one of the biggest things, like I am a motivational speaker, and I came up with a formula called Return on Resilience, where I speak to companies and corporates how you go through the worst thing in your life and you turn it into an opportunity. I have there's 4 steps that I have in that. So I think the biggest thing is when you're going through negativity and trauma, what do you do to make yourself better? You focus on positives and how you can help other people. You can't worry about yourself. From my accident came my charity. From my accident came motivational speaking, came helping other people. From my accident, I made so much money in investing and taking the focus off myself and say, why should I be the one? There's so many great people out there that I can invest in. From my accident, it's given me so much encouragement and zest and motivation for life. I understand it's only when you're being really, really unwell that you can really be happy in life and make the most out of life, But yeah, my life did suffer. Relationships suffered. When you have pain, you're very within yourself. You don't mix with a lot of people. It's very hard in life when you have pain. My businesses have an amazing business partner in my main business, which is education business. So he took a lot of that on. I couldn't make wine. I remember the first time, which is one of my biggest passions in my life. But I never forget the first time I went to my winery after my accident. I got there and I had crutches, and just to drive from Sydney to the Hunter left me in so much pain. And a winery has a lot of like ladders and tanks and hoses and wet surfaces. And I got there and I started crying. I started crying for who I was, you know? And
what do you do in those moments? In those moments where you cry?
I think a lot of it is you have to know who you are. I lost a lot of my identity. That's the first step in my 4 steps.
Yeah, can you tell us about the 4 steps?
I can, but the first step is identity. Identity is who you are. It's not who you are. It's actually how you perceive yourself. Without identity, you don't have meaning and purpose in your life. So when you go through something, your identity is broken, as big as mine. So all of a sudden, I identify myself as a strong gym person, independent, winemaker, runner, basketball player, able to move fast and do whatever I want. And then all of a sudden, I'm no longer independent. I can't go to the gym anymore. I'm stuck in a hospital bed. I'm usually out of my house at 4 a.m. in the morning. I can't do any form of exercise. I can't make wine anymore. My identity was broken. So then how do you go on in those situations?
So how do you do that? Did you form a new identity?
So there's a great book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Have you read it?
I've done the audiobook summary.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a very thin book, but it's an amazing book. And later Eddie Jaku said the same thing, but he talked about in the worst of experiences and circumstance situations, which is the Holocaust, how did he find purpose and meaning after he lost his identity to go on? And you can find it in the smallest things. And he said, Eddie Jaku he would picture his wife and what his wife would need him and want him. And that gave him the energy to wake up, you know? And Viktor Frankl said he had a friend there who needed him and he would have to wake up and help. And if he died, his friend would die. So he made a purpose. Without purpose or meaning, you're dead. And they said that the people which didn't have purpose or meaning, they just walk up to the electric fence and kill themselves.
What did you do?
Yeah, what did I do? It's a very interesting question. So I used it as a period of a lot of self-reflection. I learned a lot. I saw myself, even though I wasn't, as an athlete. How would an athlete need to recover? How can I optimize my recovery? How can I optimize myself as a human being? I became a motivational speaker. If you take the focus off yourself, you help other people. I started my charity, Hark Angel, whilst I was unwell. I started helping kids in schools. I found meaning out of my accident. How did I start Hark Angel? And this is part of my process of what we go through. So identity is your identity is broken, to notice where your identity was, to notice that you're in identity crisis. And the first part of that is to try to think of new purpose or meaning that you can get out of that. How do we do that? We go through another step. It's called integration. Integration is how you deal with the shock of what you go through. You know, there's the steps of grief. I'm trying to remember her name, but she came up with these steps of grief, I think. And it starts off with denial. You go through denial.
The stages of grief.
Stages of grief.
Yeah.
Kubler-Ross.
Yeah.
Denial, anger. Denial, anger, bargaining. Sorry, denial, anger, bargaining. Then you get depression, and then you have acceptance. So you got to go through the stages. You got to grieve. You got to grieve your old identity. Without grieving your identity, you can't find a new purpose or meaning. So you have to have a lot of inflection, a lot of self-reflection of you. And I had to do that. I had to say, okay, maybe I can never become a winemaker ever again. Maybe, I can't play basketball ever again.
Did you believe that, though?
I can't run.
Did you believe that?
I think that you have to, I always had hoped that I would do it again. But in those moments, I had to kind of grieve who I was, because you're never going to be the same person ever again. But the beautiful part is you have the opportunity to be better. We have to believe that whatever happens to us in our lives, that within us, we will make it better. We will make ourselves better and those around us better, which takes me to the next step, which is inner influence. How do you find the influence within yourself after you go through identity and integration to get through whatever you need to get through, that's something that is deep within you, that you don't give up, that you don't succumb to pain medication, that you don't lay in bed. Because an accident like mine can ruin people's lives. I've seen many people. And then the last step is inspire. Once you've influenced yourself, we're all on this life to inspire other people. How do you take what's happened to you and then use that to find an opportunity to change the world to a better place? And for me, I went through all those steps and Hark Angel came out. So and it will come up somewhere in the meaning.
How do you start a charity that big? Had you had any experience with charities before?
Yeah.
I understand the why, I think.
Yeah. I'll tell you the story later about Hark Angel, but for sure. So, back in 2012, which was my accident was in 2014. So I'll start, actually, when I was really, really young, my father, who's a really cool dude, he would bring in all the strays of our community into our house. I'm one of 9 children. So I have 8 brothers and sisters. And my dad would take the strays of the community and bring them into our house. It was Cecil. Cecil was like a homeless man, but he was a violinist and he would come and play violin. There was another guy, Mark. He was a schizophrenic. No one accepted him. He would grow up in our house. He would walk with me in my backpack to school. And there were countless other people which were the people which society rejected, which I grew up with. So I always thought that if someone was unwell, they're just normal people. And I think that's something which I really had. I can really see someone's soul and I can feel for them. I'm a big feeling person. And I grew up in that way. But people asked me what I was going to do when I was an old man, when I was young. And I always said I'd be helping children in Africa as a young person. I never know where that came from. And in 2011, I was living with a girl called Celesta, and she had a best friend called Jane who was going to Kenya, Africa, to volunteer in the Maasai community to help for a summer. And I was really interested because I've always had this kind of interest. And she spoke to me and I said, wow, I saw her the weekend before she left. She was visiting Celesta. She's my housemate. And I said, I'm going to follow your journey. And she was basically Facebooking about these young Maasai girls, beautiful young people, a Maasai tribe in Kenya, Africa, the Maasai warriors, some of the strongest people in the world. And the young girls, from a very young age, it was their rite of passage would go through female genital mutilation, FGM, which is super sad, it's type 2, by their grandmother. Would come in the middle of the night when the girl's 10 or 11 years old and with a razor.
I've heard about it.
Yeah. So it really, really sad. And from that age on, they're young women and they'd marry them off to an older man for a cow. And Jane set up boarding houses for these young girls. Now, the parents don't hate their kids. I've spent so many years and time with these communities. They don't hate their kids. It's extreme poverty that they go through. And that one child which they sell for a cow, that child will have enough money so for the rest of the family can survive and do well. It's been happening for hundreds of years, but it's extremely sad. So we set up boarding houses for these young girls. The parents were too poor to feed them and keep them. They were in a boarding house and these kids were flying through and exceeding and succeeding. And Jane asked me if I wanted to be on the board of a charity back in 2012. And I said yes. And I did a stand-up comedy night where I was a star attraction. I quit when I realized I wasn't funny. And I raised enough.
Have a video of that? Can I watch it?
And then I raised enough money to build a dining hall before I even went there to visit them for the first time because I really, really believed in it. And when I went there, I met a young girl called Lucy who had gone through all of this trauma, whose father was about to save her for a cow. And I got so attached to her. And I saved her and I surprised her. And I made a documentary on my iPhone called The Day in the Life of Lucy. And I raised enough money from that documentary to build a whole other facility over there. And that was back in 2013, before my accident. And I had my accident in 14. So I was already doing international charity work from a very young age, but from before my accident, yeah. And I think like the thing is, with these kids, it's like, they are so hungry for an opportunity. and the parents are so poor that you give them the smallest thing and they turn it into so much. And to see a young child who's been hurt or abused or not doing well, and then to give them a little bit and to see them for years and years and years and years later and do well, you get the greatest feeling in your heart that you'll ever get from anything in your life. And it's the most addictive feeling in the world. And for me, where I realize why my job is so important and why what I've turned my motivational speaking into is these children are invisible. No one tells their stories. No one cares about them. But I have a great responsibility to share their stories, to tell what happens to Lucy, Tepeu, Nashi Pai, from country to country to country, because they all have a story. They all have a name. You know, they're not forgotten. You know, someone does care for them. And I think a lot of it is just awareness.
And this is what you've created with your charity. So you had the know-how how to do it, and then the accidents happened.
Accident happened. I was already doing this kind of work.
Yes.
I started another charity with somebody else where we were building schools. And when I had my accident, I kept doing charity work behind the scenes. Obviously, I couldn't go there. And when I had my second transplant surgery, I remember I was in Australia. I was out for dinner at a restaurant opening in the city, and I got a phone call from my surgeon. And he said to me, there's a potential donor, because the first donor didn't work because I was the first in the world, and the sizing of the meniscus was different, and I was in chronic pain for a year and a half, and they couldn't work out. So he wanted to redo the whole surgery. But at this stage, the top of my knee, my femur, had now also collapsed. So I was in a really, really bad state. And the big reason why my first transplant didn't work is because the bone of my leg after Australia had collapsed so badly. My knee bone, your tibial plateau, which is your knee joint, your tibial plateau, and your femur and meniscus in the middle, sits on top of your tibia. And because my tibia had collapsed, he did a double transplant of tibia bone and then the knee on top. And double, it didn't work. So the tibia worked, but then the tibial plateau, which is the knee joint, didn't work. And that had kind of collapsed and died. And then my femur collapsed, which is a good part of my knee. So I had to do a double transplant of both parts. So he rang me and he said, there's a potential donor, but the father hasn't said yes yet. But just be prepared to come over. I need a yes or no answer because you're first on the list. And I said yes. And I went over to Germany 12 hours later. And I flew over and I did this massive, it was like a 7-hour operation. It was a really intense operation. It was I think it was my 6th or 7th operation. And by this stage, I had so many surgeries that my whole body just started giving way. And I'll give you an example. By the end, in the beginning, like a scar, like a wound, would close in 3 or 4 weeks. By the end, it would take 4 months to close because my body was exhausted. And I did this major operation, and I was lying in the recovery room. And a nurse came in and said to me, do you want to write an anonymous letter to the donor's father? He's lost everything. And I said, has anyone else written a letter? Because I've already wrote a letter for the first donor. It's hard. And I didn't want to write a letter. It's hard. What do you write to someone who's lost everything? And she said, no one at this stage. So I said, okay, I'll write a letter. But I said, tell me a little bit about the donor. And she said that the father, that the young boy was in a car, in a convertible Mercedes-Benz with his mother. They were parked at a traffic light in Hanover, Germany on a sunny day. A pickup truck, a massive truck came speeding around the corner, saw the red light, braked really late and slammed in the back of the car. The boy flung forward, hit his head like every donor, and was brain dead. The mum died on the spot. In 1 second, that
How old was he?
he was 14. But in 1 second, that father lost his whole life. And they airlifted the boy and they tried to save him, and he would have way too much brain damage. And they asked his father if he would be a donor. Now, what you should know is, and this is something, if you're not a donor, you should really look at being a donor. There are no children donors. So there are so many kids that need organs, but no father or parent will allow their child or will say, okay, my child's gonna be a donor, because you never want your child to die. So there's a massive lack worldwide for children's organs and parts. And he was a big boy, he had a big knee, and his knee was exactly the same size as mine. And the father waited 23 out of 24 hours. He lost his whole world in that second. And after 24 hours, they'll turn off the life support, and he said yes. And that son, his parts went to over 35 different people. I met 7 of them, and I was so touched that one person can save so many people. So I wrote a letter, and in the letter I wrote that I was so sorry for what had happened to him, and I could never repay him or his son, and how sorry I am, and how the pain I went through, and I recapped what I'd been through in my life because of this accident. And I said that one of the things that I do is I build schools in third world countries here and there, and I would love to repay him by building a school in his son's honor, so that all the children in that school in that third world country that make something from their lives, because if they're not in school in that country, they start work from the age of 9 years old, young boys. Girls get married from the age of 12. And we give them an opportunity to empower them to change their lives. And every single child that goes to that school, his son's memory will live on. And I put a plaque on the outside of the school, and I said to the father, please tell me the name of your son, because I want to call it after your son. And the surgeon gave him the anonymous letter. You're not allowed to know him. He's not allowed to know me. And he never wrote back to me. But he received it. And I went ahead and I fulfilled my promise. So that's where the name Hark Angel came from. He was my angel. So I called him the Hark Angel. And then I built one school, and I saw all the goodness that was coming out of it. I went there and I opened it, and I thought, why stop at one? It's like my thing that I do in my life is I times everything by 10 now. So my goal in my life would have been to do 10 schools. And I said, you know what? Let's make it 100. And in the first 4 years or 5 years of Hark Angel, we already done 10 schools. Now I'm building my 12th school. So, yeah. So I have so much gratitude to him. Wow. So much gratitude to him.
So you never got a response?
I never got a response.
Do you expect a response?
I thought he would write back to me, but I know that people grieve in different ways.
Would you have liked a response? You poured your heart.
Probably not.
No?
It's probably easy without a response.
Fair.
It's very hard. You know, you feel indebted to someone who's given you something, right? If I didn't get better, I would feel guilt. I carried that person. I have live parts of other people inside of me. They didn't die. They usually irradiate the parts and kill them. They're living inside of me. You know, they say that your energy and your dharma and who you are changes, maybe because you have an impact from other things and other people. But I feel that is a great responsibility to do the most that I can do with my life, because someone died. 2 people died so I can survive and be the best that I can be.
Just, I don't think I've ever asked you this. Have you ever met the person that hit you in the car?
It's a very sore topic for me, because at the time when I got hit, he came out of the car and he went into shock. He was an older man. And it happens a lot when someone is unwell. They can lay like in their where they are, and you just want someone to apologize. You need finality. And I couldn't understand why he just couldn't come and see me and apologize. And later he tried to do something in court so he wouldn't be blamed. He lost, of course. But at the end of it, I wrote him a letter, even though he never came. So I had his details, because he had to give me his license for the police. So I had his name and his address and his details. And I wrote him a letter forgiving him. And I did that for not only for myself, because I know that every day it would plague him to think that he's ruined someone's life, because it was a very horrific accident at the time. He also went off in an ambulance from shock. So I wanted to give him that peace of mind as well. And it was important for me just to let go and forgive.
How did that feel for you?
Felt good, like
Did it take
closure
a
for
while?
me.
It took a while.
I went through anger. You know, you go through anger, and then I wanted to kill him. He'd like ruin my life a lot. Like I was a runner and a basketball player, you know? And then, you know, I think like one thing about another lesson in life is whatever happens to us in life is a blessing from God, and you have to see it that way, and you have to just shimmy, adjust.
Well, what would you,
Yoga came out of that. So
of
many
course,
great
yeah,
things came
yeah.
out of it, man.
Yeah.
You know, and that is your choice. We all have choices in our life. When something bad happens, you can be the victim, or you can say, you know what? I'm going to take that on. I'm going to make something out of this, because it's all meant to be.
Can I ask you, what would you, if you were talking to somebody who had experienced like a challenging time right now and they couldn't see light at the end of the tunnel, how would you help them?
So I help people. I have 2 people at the moment that I'm helping, which are going through massive things. I've helped about maybe 7 or 8 people in my journey recover. And I'm kind of there like a coach for them a little bit. I don't publicize that I do that often. I'm doing less and less. And the biggest thing is never give up. Never give up. It's hard. It's fucking tough. You don't want to get out of bed some days. You know, for me, I'm going to be very honest with you. Like when I had my golden staph infection and I went from walking again to going backwards to being again I had a walking stick, then I had 2 crutches, then I had to go back in a fucking wheelchair, and then I had a 24-hour IV with poison being pushed into me to poison something else. And they told me I'm going to lose my leg after 3 years. And I went to minus, and there was no light at the end of the tunnel except losing my leg and being very, very sick and being poisoned. I had bad thoughts. We all get bad thoughts. I had thoughts that dying would be easier. But what do? You wake up every single day and you say, today's going to be a better day. Find small things that you love in your life. Small things. I was in a hospital bed. I couldn't move. I brought dumbbells in my hospital bed. I enjoyed my coffee in the morning. I made a routine every single day. Never lose purpose. Always have purpose. Always have a routine. Even in your hardest and darkest moments. And always have someone there that cares for you.
Well,
You
tell
need
me-
one person.
So when you see someone who feels stuck or lost in their own life, what's the first thing you tell them?
First of all, I think a lot of it is perspective, right? For me, I've been through the worst. Just by hearing my story, I help people. But what do I tell people which are really stuck and lost? You know, I'm still a director. I'm not as involved in Will to Live charity. We feed homeless people. Get out of your head. Go feed a homeless person. If you're stuck and lost, you're actually a selfish person. Not in a bad way, because all you're thinking about is your own thoughts. If you see that people are worse than you and you get perspective, if Will to Live, 6:45 p.m., corner of Eddie Avenue and Pitt Street, every single day Will commits his life to that. You can rock up there and you can be at service to humanity. I tell people 2 things in your life you need if you are stuck and unwell. Growth, grow, learn,
How?
change.
How? Can I
Better
give me
yourself.
an example?
Podcasts. You can listen to podcasts. You can read books and contribution, giving back. You always have to give back in life. Ultimately, when we all die, we're all in this game of life here, and we all look at each other and we say, he's got this, he's got that, I want this, I want that. And we're all on a freaking wheel, a mouse wheel of life. And we forget the ultimate thing. Life flies by, my friend, right? And it's only when you have these experiences of nearly dying, you get to actually think, you know what? Maybe I wasn't meant to be here for much longer. Maybe I'm actually going to do something that I really fucking care about. Every single person needs to find their purpose in life. And it's actually not even find. You build your fucking purpose. You build what you love to do. And you trust yourself enough that you know that whatever you choose was meant to be. And you back yourself all the way. Because we all need confidence. But back to your question, what do? You help other people. You're struggling really bad. You can find small things that you still love to do. For me, I was stuck indoors for months. I couldn't get out. They finally let me out of hospital bed and I was out there in the sun. I was the happiest person alive. Find the small wins in life. Anything that's small that makes you happy to do. Because in those moments, you are drowning. You're drowning in yourself. You're drowning in life. Your mind is overworked. You're not sleeping. You're probably overdosing on coffee or alcohol or painkillers. And it is every single day is a struggle to survive. And it's a step by step. You got to take day by day by day and never lose hope that you will get better. It's a mental game, Oddi. And that was the thing with me. I never lost hope.
How do you ask for help? Did you ever ask for help?
That is a very, very good question. One of the hardest things for me, I am one of the most independent people. I come from a family of 9 kids. In life, either you're a helper or you're the helped. There's only 2 categories in life, right? And I was always the helper and I never could accept help. And literally I would be lying there with 2 crutches and chronic pain and I couldn't get a glass of water and I couldn't get my medication and I couldn't drive. And it taught me the best lesson in life, which is to accept help from other people. And my mum was there. My mum was the most amazing person in the world. Also my friends, but my mum was a person who would just do everything for me as needed. She just knew when to be there. You know, I love my mum so much and I think that's what mums do, right?
Shout out to our mums.
Shout out to our mums.
Lucky enough
They're
to
all
have amazing
unbelievable.
mums.
All mums are amazing.
All mums are amazing.
All mums are amazing.
Did you have a friend in particular? You don't have to say who it is. Probably better if you don't. That I didn't know you when you had the accident. But was there a friend that you found particularly helpful? And if so, is there a reason why that person was helpful or supportive, or like what made them a good friend? Is there anyone that stands out?
I'm so fortunate. I have so many great friends. So many great friends. And I would say they were all equal in what they did. When you're unwell, all you want is just someone to come and sit with you and listen and talk to you and just be there for you to have a crutch on and to complain to and just to be there, just to listen. And I'm so fortunate so many of my friends did that, but when I went to Germany, I was stuck for 6 weeks at a time. My mum had to go after 2 weeks. She's got 30 grandkids and 9 kids. And there were people having babies and other people unwell. And I was stuck all alone, in a hospital hotel or a hospital. And I was very lucky. My surgeon and I had become very good friends in his family. And I've traveled to Panama with them. And they come to Australia, to the Hunter Valley. We bonded over the first in the world operation he gave me. He's a great man. And he cared so much for me.
How old was he? Just out of interest.
He's 69 years old.
Okay.
No. Oh, yeah, it must be like 66 or 67 or 68. And in Germany, they forced him to retire at 63. So he had the prime limelight of his years and he was forced to retire. But it was much, much harder when I didn't have friends. So when I was in Germany alone, it was dark. It was tough.
Can I ask you on that point, what do you do now, today, when you don't feel motivated?
Look, I think life is hard for everyone, right? For me, I'm so fortunate. I found so many great things in my life to help me be motivated. But one of the best lessons that came out of this, the whole thing for me was, when I first went to the hospital, right? I was so trained to be a killer, to be at the gym, to have no mercy for myself, to be so mean to myself. I had this inner voice. You got to kill. You got to train. You got to eat healthy. Who cares if you're not well? And not listen to who I was, how I was feeling. And one of the best lessons that ever came out of this is to drop that and to learn to be kind to myself. And when I say that, it's to have an inner voice of kindness, that it's okay if I don't feel well. It's okay if I don't feel motivated. It's okay if I want to have ice cream. It's okay if I don't feel like training today. And to get in touch with ourselves. We lose that in touchness with ourselves. And to find that compassion, self-compassion, And self-compassion is a very deep thing that a lot of people lose from a very young age, because something that happens to them where they feel like they don't deserve themselves to be nice and kind to themselves, and they lose self-compassion. It's the most horrible thing. And every single person listening to this should close their eyes and really listen to the way that they talk to themselves, whether they're kind to themselves. And I was forced to be kind to myself, and I've carried that with me. So I don't feel motivated. You know what? I can push, but I know when to rest, and I know when to stop. And sometimes we got to push further, and I have a lot of responsibility, and I know that I've got to push, but I also know that I've got to be kind to myself. So I input things in my day which are nice, which I like to do. My rehab, which is something which you haven't spoken about, I spent 4 years rehabbing. I had to learn to walk 8 different times from scratch. And that means zero weight bearing to touch, to chronic pain, to 1 foot on the ground, pain, to my foot's numb, blue, twisted, my knees in pain, learning to walk upstairs, going from 2 crutches to 1 crutch. You know how hard it is to learn how to walk? You don't appreciate the steps that you take every day. Every step for me is a miracle, right? But I made my rehab, it's all mindset. I thought of myself as an athlete, and I thought, I'm training to be a champion. I'm not just training to be better, to be good again. I'm training to be better. You know, they call it bouncing back. I call it bouncing forward. You never want to bounce back. You want to be better than you were before, always. You know? So for me, everything I do every single day now, do I get pain today? Yeah, of course I have pain. But my mind has shifted. The Maasai people told me. I lived with them for months. They don't feel pain. They learn to use their mind to move off from chronic pain, and it can make you crazy pain. So for me, I make my rehab things which I love to do. I love walking. I love doing yoga every day. But every day I'm working on myself.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about human nature through all the people you've worked with around the world?
That the people with the least and the poorest people in the world with nothing can be the most generous and happiest people in the world.
Why do you think that is?
You know, I go to these countries like Cambodia or Myanmar or Kenya, Africa, and I just went to Cambodia. I only got back from Cambodia. I was there in December from a trip. I took a friend of mine from New York and meet, and we went to one of the poorest villages in the world. And I hadn't said I was going to build a school, and I was just doing my homework, my due diligence. And I went along with these rice farmers. They make $1.20 a day US. They are the poorest people, some of the poorest people in the world. The children only have 1 meal a day in the schools. So all the kids have malnutrition. You don't see parents in that community because all the parents have to work illegally in Thailand to pay off the debts and for their children and for their parents to live in their houses. They work illegally in Thailand for $3 a day. And the ones that are left there are working for $1.20 a day. And you see so many children not in school and starting work from a very young age. And every time I go there, I was on the rice paddies with them, me and Amit. And we left the rice paddies. They didn't know I was going to donate school or what I was going to do, who I was. I didn't give them anything. And I went with them in the rice paddies, and we sat after they harvested rice the whole day. And they gave me their food when they don't even have a meal a day. And they laughed, and they were happy. And that's what they do. They share.
How did you feel?
I couldn't eat it. I couldn't eat their food.
Why not?
I feel guilty. How can I take someone's food if they're starving? But that's what they do. And one thing which I talk about in my charity, and now I've helped kids because we sponsor children as well in Kenya. And I've helped a young boy called Philip, who I met him when he was an orphan and he was extremely poor. And we put him through primary, middle school, high school, and then university. And to watch him now, he's a pastor. He was a nobody. And he helps thousands of people. When you help someone in the third world, You know, like compound interest, I call it compound giving. For one person that you help, they'll help 10 people because they want to do the same that you have done for them. And that just amazes me every single time.
What do you think we can learn from them? So we live a pretty privileged life. Most people listening to this podcast,
Yeah.
we live a privileged life, but I would say most people are probably unhappy. Not unhappy, but a lot of people aren't happy. And we have different priorities, right? And different focuses. But what can we learn and how can we take that into our daily practices or our lives?
I think that we have too much excess here whilst they're struggling for survival and the whole family unit is together as one. So if someone dies in a community, the neighbor or the family will take that child in. You know, and they see their neighbor. The neighbor's hungry, they give their neighbor food before themselves. They really help as a team. It's a community. It's really help. Here, I think we have a sense of competition with each other.
So
You know?
community versus competition, so to speak.
Yeah,
Or people
here-
that are in your community
here
you're competing with.
they want, if one person does well there, everyone does well there. You know, when I build a school there, it's empowering communities to change their lives. It's something which they'll never afford. Imagine you making $1.50 a day and a school's $80,000 US. They're never going to afford that. So the kids will never go to school, will never have a chance. And I show them this magical thing, which is that if you make $1.50 a day, which is what your children are going to make, it's called it's a cycle of poverty reversing, just continuous cycle of poverty from the parent to the child to the grandchild. But how do you break that cycle? It's impossible, but it's not, because the woman that works for me in my charity, she makes $90 US a day. And the other guy that takes me around, or if you work in the government, you can make $200 US a day. So one person can make 50 times or more the money who goes to university and who's educated than 50 of them working. And it's a brilliant time in the world where they can see that, where the community can see that, and they sacrifice even more to allow their kids to stay in school. And when I build a school, I look for these things. You know, I just don't build every school. We go to so many communities and it breaks my heart. It's the hardest part of my job is to say no. I don't build a school in any community that I haven't been to. Dollar for dollar goes directly to my cause. My donations cover all the marketing, administration, legal in my charity. But it's the hardest part is saying no, because everyone's poor. But we look for the poorest communities and where we can do the greatest amount of good. And you should come on one of my trips.
I'd love to one day.
You should come on one of my
I actually
trips and you
would.
should see them. One of our friend Jed's changed his life forever.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't know about perspective and purpose and meaning and how other people live until you've done that and until you actually help and give back. You know,
That's
it's very
amazing.
impactful.
All right, I've got two more. I know we have to wrap up.
Okay.
So this one, I've got two more questions. This one's off topic, so it's a bit random. I'm actually genuinely curious, right? What's something that you thought you wanted years ago that you're glad didn't happen?
Ooh. Something which I wanted years ago. I don't know how to answer that, but the only thing I would say is that when you're younger, you have ambitions in life, but whatever your ambition is in life, you should times it by 100. You know, I thought maybe in life that I would want to work and run a massive company myself. I own part of a massive company. I never wanted to do that. I'm more of a wild person. You know, I love working with nature. I make wine. I love working with my hands. I love spending 6 weeks in vineyards and taking grapes and having this dance of fermentation and nature and turning it into something which is wine, which I call God's gift to the world. You know?
It's nice, yeah. I'm just laughing because I don't drink wine, but
That's okay.
you gotta,
I love wine.
You got to get me into it. Okay, last question. if one day your kids or grandkids were to listen back to this, what's the one thing you'd want them to hear or learn from your story?
Never give up or give in. And whatever you want to do times by 100, whatever you want to do times by 10, times by 100, never sell yourself short. And whatever happens to in your life is meant to happen. Don't bounce back, bounce forward. We see things as the negative thing. It's actually an opportunity to grow. Without crisis, there's no growth in life. You think about it, if you're a comfortable person, there's no need for change, right? But only when you go through something, you got to see as God's little jolt for you to be better, to make more, to do more, to help more. And whatever we do, just don't get caught in the hamster wheel of life. The purpose of life is to get as much as you can. That's half. But then how do you make the world a better place with it? And that's where a lot of us forget in this world, is that whatever we get, we're meant to use to make better. You can't take it with you. You know, I had this fucking crazy thing happen to me after I had my accident, when I woke up weeks later thinking, I had so many things which I hadn't done. And it was this crazy, like, obsessive compulsive post-traumatic stress disorder that if I died, they would never have gotten done. And what a fucking waste. Had all this money in my bank account, the trip that I wanted to do, making a restaurant, starting a charity, is just to be the fucking best version of yourself that you can be. And that's ultimately what it is.
I love that. Rich, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your story, for being vulnerable and for giving us all the details. I'm so happy that you bounced forward and not back. I'm so happy you bounced forward, and I'm so grateful for you, and I really appreciate you as a friend.
Thank you. Listen, you are the Oddi Poddi. I'm so excited to be here. You're a great guy, and I think that you're a great podcast host, and the sky's the limit for you, my friend. And I think in one podcast, you should share for 20 minutes your story, and I'm happy to interview you on your own podcast.
We might have to do it, yeah. Awesome. Thanks.